The Galactic Alliance had existed for so long that most species no longer remembered who had formed it first. Over hundreds of years, planets had joined, treaties had been signed, and star maps had been redrawn again and again as explorers pushed deeper into unknown regions. These maps were seen as masterpieces carefully updated, carefully protected, and trusted by every pilot who crossed the silent darkness. They were supposed to show everything. Every sun, every route, every danger. But they all shared one strange detail. Every map ended at the same place. Right where human space began, it wasn't marked as dangerous. There were no warnings, no symbols, no messages about restricted zones or hazardous stars. The line simply stopped, like a hand frozen in mid-air. Beyond that, the chart was blank. Every pilot accepted it as normal. Every teacher explained it as if it were obvious. Every official avoided talking about it. Only one young researcher, a quiet alien named Lero, found it strange enough to bother them. Lero worked on one of the most ordinary jobs at the navigation center of the Alliance, updating old maps with new information sent by explorers. The job was boring to most people, but Lero enjoyed details. Lero enjoyed patterns. They liked to find mistakes and fix them, and they liked it even more when no one else had noticed the mistake at all. That feeling made them proud. But one day, while checking a star chart, Lero saw something that didn't match anything in the training manuals. The updated map for Sector 9 ended right at the border of human space, just like every map before it. Lero zoomed in on the last line. The stars past that point were not even blurred. They simply didn't exist on the chart at all. Lero checked the map from last year. Same thing. Lero checked a map from 50 years ago. Same thing. Lero checked a map from 200 years ago. Still the same. Why? How could a map stay unfinished for so long? Curiosity started bubbling inside Lero, the way cold water bubbles when heated slowly. They turned to a colleague at a nearby desk, someone from a tall, insect-like species known for their sharp memory. Do you know why the map ends here? Lero asked. The colleague's antennae stiffened instantly. Their large eyes flicked away. Don't touch that, they whispered. Lero blinked. Why not? It looks like the last part is missing. The colleague leaned closer, speaking so softly their voice barely carried across the desk. We don't map past human borders. We never have. We never will. That's all you need to know. That answer didn't satisfy Lero at all. Later that day, Lero casually brought it up in the break room. A group of researchers fell silent the moment the question was asked. One of them stood up and left without finishing their drink. Another shook his head and muttered that some things were better left untouched. A third simply stared at Lero, as if trying to decide whether the question was a joke. That look stayed with Lero all night. What was wrong with asking why a map stopped? It was just a map. Information. Borders. Nothing more. But the reaction was too strong, too fearful. It reminded Lero of old childhood stories about dark corners where children weren't supposed to play. Those stories had always turned out to be myths. Maybe this one was too. Or maybe something real was hiding in the dark beyond human space. The next morning, Lero took it further. They sent a small request to the Alliance Council, asking for clarification on why human territory was never charted. Lero expected a long delay, maybe a polite rejection, maybe even silence. Instead, the reply came faster than any response Lero had ever received. Your request is denied. Do not pursue this matter further. Just one short line. No explanation. A chill ran through Lero's body. Something was definitely wrong. And the strongest clue was not the denial itself, but the speed of it. The council almost never responded quickly. They usually debated every tiny detail, especially when requests came from junior researchers like Lero. But this They refused immediately, as if they were waiting for someone to ask. Still, denial only made Lero more curious. Why were they afraid of a blank map? Why were even old explorers uncomfortable talking about it? The more Lero tried to stop thinking about it, the more their mind returned to that empty space on the screen. Maps weren't supposed to end. Space didn't just stop. Something was hiding there. Something everyone else pretended not to see. Ler began digging quietly, starting with archived star logs records made by explorers long before Lero was even born. Many logs were normal, full of comments about fuel, speed, and weather patterns in space. But some logs were heavily edited. Entire pages were removed, replaced with a single short sentence, classified under the Human Accord, Tier Omega. Lero frowned. The word Omega was used only for the highest level of secrets. It was used for threats that could wipe out civilizations. Why was it tied to empty space? Lero looked deeper. It took hours of searching, but at last, buried in an old folder, they found something different. A map from before the human species had joined the Alliance. That map didn't end at the border. It continued far beyond it. There were stars drawn there. Routes, notes, everything. But later versions had those entire regions removed. Someone had erased the area. Someone had made sure no one remembered what used to be there. Lero stared at that discovery with a mix of fear and excitement. The map wasn't missing pieces. It had been edited. It had been cut down to end exactly where human space started. But why? Who erased it? And what was there before it disappeared? Lero was so deep in thought, they didn't hear the soft footsteps behind them. Only when a shadow fell across the console did Lero look up. It was an older researcher, a quiet person who rarely spoke to anyone. Their pale skin and tired eyes made them seem like someone carrying old memories. "You should stop," the elder said gently. Not angry, not commanding, just tired. Why? Lero asked. The elder sighed. "You're young. You still think every question deserves an answer. But don't you want to know what's past the border?" Lero asked softly. The elder closed their eyes for a moment, as if reliving something painful. When they opened them, their voice shook. "I saw that place once." Lero's heart jumped. "What did you see?" The elder hesitated. "Nothing. That's what scared me." "Nothing?" "Not darkness," the elder whispered. "Not empty space." It was as if the universe simply stopped, like a sheet of glass. And behind it, something looked back. Lero swallowed hard. What was it? No one knows. And it's better that way. Lero wanted to ask more. But the elder turned and walked away, shoulders hunched, leaving Lero alone again. That was when Lero realized something important. Every species seemed afraid of this subject, even those known for bravery in war, even those known for cold logic, even those famous for exploring danger. They all shared the same silent rule: never approach the human border, and never ask why the map stops there. It didn't make sense. Humans were friendly, easy to talk to, and always eager to trade. They weren't the type to scare people. In fact, humans often joked about being the new kids in the galaxy. But the fear wasn't directed at humans. It was directed at something behind them. One evening, after everyone else had left the navigation center, Lero sat alone in the dim light, staring at the map. The blank space seemed to glow, inviting and threatening at the same time. It felt like the universe was holding its breath, and Lero couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of a secret. Everyone already knew, but refused to say out loud. The next step was clear. Even if it was dangerous. If no one in the Alliance would answer the question, that only one group of people might know the truth: humans themselves. Lero closed the console, took a deep breath, and made a decision that would change their life forever. They would go to human space, would find someone willing to explain. They would find out what was hiding behind the blank part of the map, no matter how many people warned them not to, because the universe was too big for silence, and Lero was tired of pretending. The silence wasn't there. Lero didn't sleep well after, deciding to uncover the truth behind the border. Every time they closed their eyes, they saw that blank space on the map silent, empty, and yet somehow heavier than anything they had ever seen. It felt like someone had drawn a curtain across the universe, and Lero was the only one foolish or brave enough to try pulling it aside. The next morning, Lero walked to the archive room with slow steps, unsure if they should continue or turn back and act normal again. But curiosity won. When they reached the archives, the room was quiet. Only a few small lights glowed in the corners, giving everything a faint blue shine. Lero moved deeper inside, heading straight for the restricted shelves. Technically, they weren't banned from entering, but these sections were rarely touched. Dust floated in the air like tiny stars where no one had walked for months. Lero pulled out an old record tablet. It was cracked on one corner, and the edges felt rough against their fingers. A tag on the side said it was from the early days of the Alliance, long before humans had joined. That meant it might contain untouched maps. Lero powered it on. The screen flickered for a moment before lighting up. There it was. A full star chart extending beyond the region now known as human space. Names of stars, routes, notes from explorers, even small drawings of asteroid belts. Everything existed there. Everything the modern map lacked. Lero stared in awe. That part of the universe had once been known. It had once been real. And now it was not just forgotten but removed. But why? They zoomed in on one strange detail. Several star systems were circled with red ink, and beside each one was a symbol Lero didn't recognize. It looked like a wave and a spiral combined, almost like a hand drawn in the middle of collapsing. A note below it read, "The quieting. Avoid these regions." The writing was old and faded, but the warning felt recent, almost fresh, like something whispered into the tablet yesterday. Lero kept reading. The logs from explorers had been typed. In simple sentences, crew heard faint sounds through the ship walls. Time felt slow near the boundary. Light bends strangely, does not follow natural patterns. Recommend no further visits until a full study is approved. Lero frowned. None of this was listed in modern databases. It was as if someone had hidden the entire chapter of history. They scrolled further, but suddenly the screen turned black. A red message flashed. Access restricted. Tier Omega. Lero nearly dropped the tablet. That same phrase again. Tier Omega. The highest classification level. Something reserved for unimaginable dangers. Lero tried pressing buttons, but nothing worked. The screen refused to show more. It was like the tablet had locked itself, just because Lero had scrolled too close to the truth. Just then, footsteps echoed in the hall. Startled, Lero shut off the device and slid it back into its place. An older worker entered the room, carrying a tray of small tools. They glanced at Lero and gave a polite nod. "Working early?" they asked. "Yes," Lero replied, trying to sound casual. "Just updating some references." "Good," the elder said. "But don't spend too long in the old sections. They're messy." That pause made Lero nervous. Not the words, but the tone. It carried the same quiet warning everyone seemed to share. The more Lero looked around, the more they realized. Something strange. Every person in the building walked quickly past this room. No one ever stopped. No one even looked inside unless they had to. It was like the archive room was a place of ghosts. Later, Lero sent out a few private messages to retired explorers people who had traveled before the Alliance added strict rules. Some didn't reply. Others replied with short, vague answers. But one message landed from an older pilot, known for traveling further than anyone else in their time. The message said, "If you want to know about the border, come visit me. But be ready. What I tell you might take away your sleep." Lero took a shuttle to the pilot's small home on a quiet moon station. It was a humble place, warm and simple. The retired explorer sat outside on a bench, staring at the stars like they were old friends. Lero greeted them politely and waited for the pilot to speak. "So," the elder said, "you're the one asking about the maps." "Yes," Lero replied. "I want to understand why the maps stop at human space, and what's past it." The elder smiled sadly. "Everyone wants to know that at least once in their life. The difference is, most people learn to stop asking." "But you didn't," Lero said. "No," the pilot said softly. "I went too close. I saw something I was not meant to see." Lero leaned forward. "What happened?" "It was during an early exploration mission," the pilot said. "We were young, foolish, full of excitement. Our maps went further than they do today. We followed a route no one uses now. It led us near a place we later learned was part of the quieting." "What is that?" Lero asked. The pilot hesitated. "I don't know exactly. None of us do. But the moment we reached that area, our ship instruments went silent. No warnings. No errors. Just complete silence." Lero felt a shiver. "The stars outside didn't move right," the pilot continued. "They looked like they were bending, like we were underwater. Light wasn't natural. And then we heard something like a low hum. It wasn't sound through the speakers. It felt like it came from inside our own thoughts." Lero's fingers gripped the edge of the bench. "Then what?" They whispered. "We turned around," the pilot said firmly. "Every instinct in us told us to leave. Not because it was dangerous. It didn't feel like danger. It felt like we were being observed." Lero waited, and before we left, the pilot said, voice dropping, "one of us saw a shape. Not a ship, not a creature, just a presence. A shadow where there should be light." "What did it want?" Lero asked. "That's the frightening part," the elder pilot said. "It didn't want anything. It only watched. Like we were insects flying too close to a sleeping giant." They looked at Lero with tired eyes. When we returned, the Alliance questioned us. They removed our maps. They told us never to go back, and never to speak of it again. That region was hidden, erased. The charts were rewritten. Humans joined the Alliance much later, and by then the border already existed. Lero listened, heart pounding. "So this has nothing to do with humans?" The pilots shook their head. "No, humans are not the reason the map ends. They simply live near the place where the universe becomes strange." Lero sat back, feeling overwhelmed. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but the picture they formed was unsettling. Something ancient had been out there. Something the Alliance feared, something no one dared to disturb. Still, one question refused to leave Lero's mind. "If this thing was that dangerous," Lero asked slowly, "why doesn't anyone talk about it openly?" The pilot sighed. "Because fear spreads fast, and the Alliance believes fear will bring curiosity, and curiosity will bring someone too close to that place again." Silence settled between them. The moon's soft light illuminated the quiet yard. "You're not done, are you?" the pilot finally asked. "No," Lero admitted. "I want to understand more. I want to know what happened after humans arrived. Why does the map still stop exactly at their border?" The elder gave a sad smile. "Then you'll have to speak with humans themselves. They may know something. Or maybe they know nothing at all. But their behavior, it has always been strange around that topic." "Strange how?" Lero asked. They never travel near the boundary, the pilot said. They never build stations close to it. Even their bravest explorers avoid it. They don't acknowledge it, but they fear it too. Or maybe they respect it. That answer only deepened the mystery. When Lero headed back to the station, the stars seemed different, brighter, sharper, more alive. Every glimpse of the border region felt heavier, like a silent reminder of something waiting patiently in the dark. As Lero walked through the large hallway of the navigation center later that evening, a new thought settled inside them like a growing flame. If every species feared the border, if the Alliance erased entire regions of space, if humans avoided it without explanation, then there had to be a reason powerful enough to silence an entire galaxy. Lero knew what they had to do next. They would enter human space, not as a tourist dot, not as an official, but as someone searching for the truth no one wanted to face. And deep inside, Lero could not decide whether the feeling rising in them was courage or the beginning of fear. Lero had always imagined human space as lively and colorful, filled with noise, energy, and curious people. And in many ways, it truly was like that. When the small shuttle crossed the border and approached the first human station, the sight was almost comforting. Bright lights, warm signals, welcoming voices guiding ships in. Humans seemed to enjoy decorating their stations with small touches that made them feel alive. Soft music in the background, small plants in the corner, murals painted on the walls. It was different from the cold and strict designs many alien species preferred. But even with all this warmth, Lero couldn't shake the strange heaviness they felt the moment the shuttle entered human territory. Like the air around them quietly changed. Maybe it was just nerves. Or maybe it was something else. When Lero stepped out of the shuttle, they were greeted by a group of humans working at the docking bay. They smiled politely and helped check Lero's identity badge. One of them, a tall person with calm eyes, offered to guide Lero to the visitor center. People moved around with easy confidence, laughing, talking, carrying tools or tablets. Nothing looked suspicious. Nothing felt dangerous. Everything seemed normal. Maybe too normal. As Lero walked through the hallways, the humans they passed gave friendly nods or short greetings. Humans always greeted strangers that way, Lero knew. But the warmth in their voices felt different here, almost like they were trying a little too hard to make sure visitors felt comfortable. That tiny detail stuck with Lero. The visitor center was small but cozy. A human attendant handed Lero a cup of water and a small digital booklet with guidelines for exploring human space. Most of it was typical. Respect the laws, inform authorities of travel plans, avoid restricted areas. But one rule stood out at the bottom, highlighted in soft orange. Do not approach Boundary Zone 12 without special permission. Lero felt a chill. They hadn't even asked about the border yet, and already the guidelines warned them away from it. The attendant noticed Lero staring at the line. "Oh, that's mostly for safety," she said casually. "There's nothing interesting out there." Her smile looked normal, but her eyes flickered for a moment, as if she said those words many times before and didn't fully believe them. Lero thanked her and stepped out into the main platform, where large windows showed a view of space. It was beautiful, glittering with stars like scattered jewels. But far in the distance, the region near the boundary looked strangely calm. Too calm. Almost like the stars themselves hesitated to shine there. For the next day, Lero spoke with human scientists who lived on the station. They were polite, intelligent, and eager to share information about human technology, culture, and their history with the Alliance. But whenever Lero tried to guide the conversation toward the border, the tone changed. One scientist suddenly laughed and said it was just old superstition. Another shrugged and changed the topic. A third simply looked uncomfortable and said he didn't know anything. They were avoiding the question. Every single one of them But Lero was patient. They didn't push too hard. Instead, they observed. They noticed something small but important. Humans never displayed maps that extended past their outermost colonies. Every hologram map in the station ended at the same place. Just like the Alliance charts, that the border wasn't just an Alliance rule humans themselves didn't map beyond it. Why? A few days later, Lero met someone who changed everything. The station assigned a human, pilot named Iro, to show Lero around different parts of their territory. Iro had a calm nature and a gentle voice, and unlike the others, he didn't mind silence. Sometimes he and Lero walked for several minutes without saying a word, which made Lero strangely comfortable. On their second day together, Lero finally asked the question that had been burning inside them. Why does the map end at human space? Iro didn't answer right away. Instead, he kept walking toward the observation deck, where the wide glass wall opened into the dark view of the stars. Only when they reached the window did he speak. "You're not the first person to ask," he said softly. But most stop asking after a while. Lero faced him. "But you haven't answered." Iro leaned on the railing, eyes focused on the far, distant line where the familiar clusters of stars ended and the silent region began. "The border has always been there," he said, "even before we joined the Alliance, even before our people could travel far." "That doesn't explain why no one goes past it," Lero said. Iro hesitated. His calm expression wavered, showing something deeper worry or maybe memory. "You have to understand," he began slowly. "Humans are naturally curious. If there's something new or unknown, we usually want to understand it immediately, sometimes too quickly. But this is different." "Different how?" "Humans don't go near that place," Iro said. "Not because we're scared. Or maybe we are scared, but it's deeper than that. It's like an instinct, a feeling inside us that says, 'Don't go there.'" Lero looked at him carefully. "A feeling? A fear? But based on what?" Iro swallowed. "We've lost records from early exploration times. A lot of them. Old data was corrupted or erased by accident, lost during wars, system failures. Or so the official story says. But the older generation in my family, before me, they used to say there was a reason the records disappeared." "What reason?" "That some things shouldn't be written down." The words unsettled Lero in a way they couldn't explain. "Do you think your ancestors saw something out there?" Iro didn't answer. Instead, he asked a question of his own. "Have you ever looked into the dark and felt like the dark was looking back?" Lero froze. The retired alien explorer had said something similar. And now a human was saying it too. Iro continued, voice softer than before. "Every pilot who goes too close to the boundary says the same thing. Their instruments act strange. The space around them feels heavy. And sometimes," he paused, "sometimes they hear things." "Heard what?" Lero asked, though they were almost afraid of the answer. "Not sounds. Not voices. More like pressure. A presence. Something brushing against the mind." Lero felt goosebumps despite the warm air of the station. "But the official reports don't mention anything like that," Lero said. "They wouldn't," Iro replied. "Who wants to admit they turned around because space felt like it was watching them?" It made sense in a way that frightened Lero. A fear so deep, no one dared to write it down. A fear that became instinct. Iro took a slow breath. "We don't explore past the border. We never have in my lifetime. But we didn't create that boundary. Something else did." Lero stiffened. "Are you saying something is out there?" Iro nodded slightly. "Something old. Something that doesn't communicate, doesn't attack, doesn't move. It just exists. And the closer you get, the more you feel like it's aware of you. Lero's mouth felt dry. Why doesn't anyone talk about it openly? Because the more you talk about something, Iro said, the more real it becomes. And the more real it becomes, the more people become curious. And curiosity. He looked directly at Lero. Curiosity is what wakes it up. But what is it? Lero asked, almost whispering. Iro shook his head. No one knows. And honestly, most of us don't want to know. Not really. For a long moment, they both stood quietly in front of the glass window, watching the distant calm glow of human space, and the silent stillness beyond it. After a while, Iro straightened. What you're looking for isn't here on the station. If you want real answers, you need to go closer. Closer to the boundary? Lero asked. Iro nodded reluctantly. I can take you to a small observation outpost near that region. It's safe enough if we don't go too far. Lero felt the weight of the moment settle on their shoulders. This was what they came for. This was the path to understanding the unmapped space, the missing stars, the erased history. But now that the chance was real, fear grew inside them like a slow-moving shadow. Still, they forced themselves to nod. Yes, Lero said quietly. Take me there. Iro looked at Lero with a mixture of respect and pity. He turned away, giving a soft breath that sounded like acceptance. Then prepare yourself, he said. Once you see that place, you won't forget it. None of us do. As Lero walked back to their temporary room that night, the hallway lights seemed dimmer, the walls seemed quieter, and even the hum of the station felt lower. For the first time since arriving, Lero wondered if they might be making a mistake, but the mystery was too deep. The silence was too loud. And the truth waited just beyond the maps. Edge. Whether they were ready for it or not. The return to human space was not smooth. The crew had hoped for calm days, maybe even a little rest after everything they had gone through. But the moment their ship crossed the invisible border where the star maps ended, a strange silence filled the cabin. It was not the silence of peace. It felt like stepping into a room where someone had been talking loudly only moments ago, but stopped the second you entered. The pilot slowed the ship without being asked. Every sensor beeped softly, almost unsure of what it was scanning. The others looked out the windows, expecting anything to jump at them. But human space looked normal. Calm stars, empty vacuum, familiar routes. Nothing dangerous at first glance. Yet something was off. The researcher leaned back in her seat and folded her arms tightly. It feels wrong, she said quietly. Not fear, but a tension she couldn't explain. The historian nodded. It's like being watched by something far away, but too big to see. They all felt it. The air inside the ship seemed heavier, like the space around them had changed density. The pilot tried to laugh it off, but even he kept glancing at the radar every few seconds. They decided to head toward the nearest human station, an old outpost built long before any species had joined the Galactic Alliance. It wasn't large or impressive, just a quiet place where traders stopped, crew members refueled, and explorers rested before jumping into deep space. But as they approached, the outpost's lights flickered in a way none of them had seen before. The station turned slowly, and its antennas moved like they hadn't been maintained in years. The pilot frowned. This thing was fully upgraded just 6 months ago. Why does it look abandoned? The researcher tapped her console again and again. I can't get a proper signal. It's like the entire outpost is sleeping. The historian stared at the screen, or trying not to be found. Her words made everyone pause. The ship finally connected with the docking rails, though the clamps shook as if they were rusty. Just touching the station felt strange. The metal looked slightly darker, like it had lost some life. Once they stepped inside, The hallway lights flicked on one by one. They weren't bright white like usual. They were dim, almost yellowish, as if the station had been running on emergency power for months. No voices. No footsteps. No machines. Only the low hum of the life support system. The researcher whispered, "Where is everyone?" Usually, the outpost had a small staff, maybe a rotating group of workers, but at least someone should have been there. The pilot walked ahead, his boots echoing louder than normal. They reached the main command room. The seats were empty. The screens were off, except for one small monitor showing a slow pulse. Like a heartbeat, the historian stepped closer. That's a beacon, but not a distress signal. It's a memory file. The crew exchanged confused looks. Memory files were rare. Stations only created them when something important happened. Something unexpected. Something that had to be recorded even if no one survived. The pilot swallowed hard. "Play it." The screen flickered, and a shaky recording appeared. The person speaking looked tired. Their face showed fear, not panic, but the kind of fear someone feels when they realize the truth too late. If anyone sees this, something is wrong with human space. The sensors pick up nothing, yet the systems keep triggering silent alarms. We hear things echoes from outside the station like whispers, carried through vacuum. The recording glitched. A soft crackle filled the room. The darkness at the edge of the map. It moves, not physically. Something behind it watches us. We don't know what it wants. Another glitch. The crew leaned in closer. Every species feared this area for centuries. They pretended not to. They pretended humans were safe. But they remembered something. Something their ancestors learned long ago. The sound cut out. The screen went black. The pilot stepped back, staring at the blank display. "What does that mean?" The historian sighed, rubbing her forehead. "It means we're missing a huge piece of the truth." The researcher checked the logs again. If all this is true, then why didn't anyone tell us? Why hide it? They walked through the station, searching for more clues. Every room felt untouched, like whoever lived there walked away without taking a single thing. Cups still sat on tables. Tools lay on workbenches. Even a small jacket hung near a door. No signs of panic. No signs of a fight. Just emptiness. The crew reached the observation deck. The windows stretched across almost an entire wall, giving a view of the stars. Yet for some reason, the space seen through the glass looked darker than usual. Not empty dark, like a curtain made of shadow, was slowly sliding into view. The researcher pressed her hands against the glass. "This wasn't here before," she whispered. The others stood silently beside her. The historian finally spoke. "I think the galactic map ends here for a reason. Not because there's nothing beyond it, but because something beyond it doesn't want to be mapped." The pilot frowned. "You mean something erased it?" "Not erased," the historian said. "Prevented, stopped, locked." They all stared at the darkness outside, unsure whether it was real or just their imagination. The human mind often filled blanks with shadows. But this shadow felt too deliberate, too still. The pilot took a deep breath. "We need to gather everything from the station and leave. Whatever happened here, it's not safe to stay." They split up, checking rooms and collecting files. While searching through the old communication logs, the historian noticed something odd. Several messages had been sent to the Galactic Council months ago, asking for help, for investigation, for clarification. None of them were answered. Not even acknowledged. The historian whispered. They knew. She called the others to show them. The researcher studied the unanswered messages. They didn't just ignore the station. They silenced it. The pilot clenched his jaw. Why would they hide something so big? They knew the answer now. Every species had avoided human space for centuries. They traded with humans, talked with them, admired their progress, but never entered the region where the map stopped. They used polite excuses, political differences, old agreements, security protocols. Humans never questioned it because they trusted the council. The historian looked at the others with a hollow expression. They feared something here, and instead of explaining it, they let us walk blind. The lights suddenly flickered again. This time the shadows in the room felt thicker, as if something outside was pressing against the station. The pilot grabbed his communicator. "We're leaving, now." They rushed to the docking area, carrying every file they found. But as they approached the ship, the station trembled softly, not from impact, but like something large had passed near it, moving without sound. The researcher froze. "Did you feel that?" The pilot didn't answer. He unlocked the ship door and waved everyone inside. Before leaving, the historian glanced back toward the station's windows. The curtain of darkness looked closer now, not moving in a natural way, more like spreading, slowly filling gaps between stars. She whispered to herself, "Something has been here longer than humans, maybe longer than anyone." And now, for the first time in centuries, someone had noticed it again. The ship detached from the outpost, engines glowing softly. They drifted away in silence, not daring to speak until the station looked small behind them. Finally, the pilot said, "We're going deeper into human space. We need answers. Real ones." The researcher nodded. "And we need to find out what everyone else knew, but never told us." The historian watched the shadows expanding behind the station. "Part of me wishes we never saw this. But now that we have, we can't pretend it isn't there." None of them knew what waited for them, farther inside human space. But one thing was clear, now something ancient, something that had once terrified every species, had been hiding at the end of the map dot, and it was no longer asleep. The journey deeper into human space felt longer than it should have. The ship moved fast, its engines humming smoothly, but time inside seemed to stretch. Maybe it was because the crew kept thinking about that strange darkness they saw near the outpost. Maybe it was because they still didn't understand what was waiting for them. Every person on board carried a different kind of worry, but none of them spoke much. Silence felt safer. Somehow the pilot checked the navigation screen again and again, even though the route was simple. "Our next stop is the old research station," he finally said, breaking the quiet. "If anything strange happened in human space, they would have recorded it." The researcher nodded slowly. "Every mystery has some trace. Scientists always leave clues." The historian sat near the window, staring at the stars passing by. They still looked normal, bright, steady, peaceful. No sign of shadows here. No sign of anything unusual. But she couldn't shake the memory of that dark curtain creeping over the stars behind the outpost. "It won't be the same when we get there," she said quietly. The pilot glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "The research station we're visiting. It was one of the first human centers to study the deep unknown near the edge of the map. If something changed out there, they would have noticed it first." He didn't argue. Nobody did. Hours passed. They checked systems, reviewed old logs they brought from the abandoned outpost, and tried to piece together what might have happened. None of the files explained the shadows directly, but the messages sent to the Galactic Council said enough humans had seen something, felt something, sensed something they couldn't name. At last, the research station came into view. It floated in orbit around a small, dull star. The station was much bigger than the outpost they had visited earlier. Long tunnels stretched out like branches, and large panels shimmered slightly in the weak light. But even from a distance, they could tell something wasn't right. The lights were flickering again. Not all of them, only some parts of the station glowed, while others stayed completely dark. A faint pulsing light blinked around the outer hull, like a heartbeat trying to keep itself alive. The pilot slowed the ship. Power is low, but the station is still active. The researcher leaned forward, staring at the structure. Look at the shield generators. They've been running nonstop for months. Why would a research center need shields at maximum power? The historian lowered her voice. They were protecting themselves from something. The closer they got, the more uneasy they felt. The docking bay doors were half open, not fully broken, but stuck as if they had tried to close and never finished. The ship slid through carefully, and the landing gear touched the floor with a small thud dot inside. The docking bay was empty. No workers. No noise. No movement. The researcher whispered. Not again. They stepped out of the ship slowly. The station's interior lights flickered gently, casting long shadows across the floor. Unlike the outpost, this station looked used recently. Tools were scattered near consoles. Screens glowed with half-finished calculations. Someone had been working here, maybe just days ago, but they were nowhere to be found. The pilot tapped a console. Systems are online, but unstable. That means someone left in a hurry. The historian walked toward a large observation window. The view outside was calm, but something about the star seemed wrong. It didn't shine evenly. Parts of its light looked swallowed, as if something invisible floated in front of it. The historian felt a chill run down her spine. It's here, too. The researcher joined her. Not the shadow itself, but the effect of it. Whatever touched the border of human space is spreading. They moved deeper into the station, following a dim trail of emergency lights. The air felt thick, almost heavy, like it had been closed off for too long. Every small soundly footsteps, their breathing echoed louder than normal. Finally, they reached the central lab. The doors opened slowly, creaking in a way no modern door should. Inside, the room was a mess of notebooks, tablets, and projection screens. Papers were scattered across the floor, and one large screen showed an incomplete image, a star map with a huge, dark patch covering the area near human space. The researcher walked straight to the main desk. These scientists knew something, and they tried to understand it. She picked up a tablet. It contained a series of journal entries, written by someone who had been studying the darkness closely. She read the first few lines aloud. We saw the first distortion 2 months ago. A region of space that sensors refused to map. Not empty, just unseen. As if something pulled the details out of reality. The pilot frowned. That sounds impossible. The historian shook her head. Not impossible, but unknown. They looked around the room again. Every screen showed similar diagrams, circles of light, lines of data, star patterns that bent strangely near the border. In one corner, a small device blinked with a pulsing blue light. The researcher recognized it. That's a memory vault, she said. Scientists store their most important discoveries in those. The pilot touched its surface. It's still warm. The historian stepped back. Then they left it here for someone to find. The researcher opened the vault carefully. Inside was a single crystal-like data drive. It was glowing faintly, as if carrying something alive inside. She placed it into the nearest console. The screen lit up instantly, and a recording began, showing the chief scientist of the station. The person looked exhausted, with dark circles under their eyes and a tremble in their voice. If you are seeing this, then the station has been abandoned. We didn't want to leave, but the shadows grew closer. Not literally, not physically, but something in the air changed. Something in our minds. The scientist paused, glancing around nervously. We discovered that the edge of the galactic map does not end because there is nothing beyond it. It ends because something beyond it erases what we try to map. The crew exchanged tense looks. The scientist continued. It is not a creature. not a force, not a natural phenomenon. It is aware. Aware of what we see. Aware of what we try to understand. And whenever we attempt to study it, it pulls back. Not out of fear, but out of warning. The pilot whispered, "Are they saying it knows we're looking at it?" The researcher shivered. "That's what it sounds like." The recording went on. The other species remember fragments of old stories. Their ancestors encountered this darkness long before humans existed. They learned not to study it too closely, not to map it, not to question it. And that fear passed on through generations. They hid it from us because they did not want us to repeat their mistakes. The historian stared at the screen, jaw tight. So they lied to protect us. The scientist's voice lowered. But humans, we do not stop asking questions. We saw the darkness as a mystery to solve. And now it watches us again. The recording cut off suddenly. The researcher stepped away from the console. "This is bigger than we thought." The pilot paced back and forth. "So what do we do? Leave? Warn others? Or investigate further?" The historian turned to him slowly. "We must understand what this thing wants. The other species fear it, but they never discovered why it reacts to curiosity." The researcher nodded. "Maybe it's not dangerous. Maybe it's trying to warn us about something else." The pilot stared at both of them. "Or maybe we're waking something that should have stayed asleep." They didn't argue. All three of them felt the same conflict inside. Curiosity on one side, fear on the other, just as the pilot approached the door to suggest leaving. The lights in the station dimmed again, this time not flickering, but fading smoothly, like someone had gently turned a dial dot, and the darkness outside the windows shifted, not moving like a creature, not expanding like smoke, shifted, as if it became aware of them. The historian held her breath. "It knows we're here." The researcher whispered, "We need to go. Now." They rushed back to the docking bay, their footsteps echoing faster than ever. The ship awaited them, lights glowing faintly. As they boarded, a deep hum vibrated through the station, not mechanical, not electrical, but something that felt like a distant voice speaking without sound. They didn't wait to understand it. The pilot fired the engines, detached from the docking clamps, and pushed forward into open space dot as the research station shrank behind them. The darkness near the star seemed to bend slightly, almost forming a shape. Not a creature, not a face, just an awareness. "A presence," the historian whispered. "It's watching us leave." The researcher closed her eyes. "Then it knows we're coming." The pilot tightened his grip on the controls. "Next stop, the deepest point of human space. If there's truth to find, it's there." They flew on, heading toward the heart of the mystery, and the darkness followed slowly, silently. Patiently, the ship entered the deepest part of human space with a kind of quiet that felt unnaturally heavy. The stars here looked different farther away, dimmer, almost tired. It was a region few humans visited, because there was nothing valuable here. No trade routes, no mining zones, just empty space that led to the edge of the unknown. But now, the crew knew this empty space wasn't truly empty. The researcher sat near her console, watching the sensors flicker between blank readings and strange distortions. Nothing stayed stable for more than a few seconds. Every measurement changed, as if something kept touching the data and pulling it apart. The pilot tightened his grip on the controls. "This is the last point before the map ends. Beyond this, the system refuses to draw anything." The historian looked out the window. The darkness ahead didn't look like normal space. It was deeper, thicker, almost like ink spreading through water. She whispered, "It's waiting." Silence filled the cabin again. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that made every breath feel too loud. The researcher finally broke the quiet. We came here for answers, so we can't turn back now. The pilot nodded. Let's go closer. Slow and steady. He eased the ship forward. The engines hummed, but the sound seemed to weaken as they approached the dark boundary, almost like the surrounding space was swallowing the noise. The closer they got, the harder it became to tell where light ended and shadow began. Something unexpected happened. The ship's lights dimmed, not flickered. Not failed, dimmed, as if something outside gently pressed against them. The temperature dropped by a few degrees. The air felt denser. The historian whispered, "It feels like being underwater." The researcher checked the readings again. It's not physical. Whatever is here, it affects perception too. The pilot stopped the ship. This is far enough for now. They stared ahead. The map's boundary floated just a short distance away, an invisible wall where sensors refused to work and every species refused to go. But now, standing before it, they understood why. This wasn't a border drawn by humans. It wasn't even drawn by the galaxy dot. It was something else. Something old. The historian leaned forward, eyes wide but calm. If this thing reacts to curiosity, then maybe it also reacts to silence. The researcher nodded slowly. Maybe it's been waiting for someone to acknowledge it. The pilot looked uncertain, but trusted them. So what do we do? Talk to it? The historian took a deep breath. Maybe not talk. Maybe just listen. They turned off external scanners. They dimmed inside lights. They powered down everything except life support and minimal systems. The ship floated there, quiet as a held breath, for a long moment. Nothing happened. Then the darkness moved not forward. Not fast, but with slow, deliberate motion, as if waking up from a long sleep. It spread gently across the stars, not blocking them, but bending their light. Patterns formed in the shadow, shifting like waves. The researcher felt her heart hammering, but she didn't look away. "It's responding," she whispered. The pilot tried not to panic. "Responding how?" The historian watched carefully. "It's showing us something." And then they all saw it. Images formed in the darkness, faint, blurry, but recognizable. Not visions, not hallucinations, memories. Ancient memories, older than any species. They saw shapes of worlds that no longer existed. Civilizations rising and falling like sparks in the night. The shadow wasn't a monster or an enemy. It was a witness. The memory shifted again, now showing the early ancestors of other species. They looked fearful, fragile, staring into this same darkness long, long ago. They tried to map it, study it, challenge it. But the shadow never fought. It only retreated, like a wave pulling back from shore. The historian whispered. They were afraid, but the shadow never harmed them. The pilot frowned. Then why is everyone so scared of it? The darkness answered in its own way. The next image they saw wasn't of a planet or a species. It was of the galaxy itself, millions of years ago. And at the very edge, beyond what any star map recorded, something else existed, something vast, shifting, and alive. Not a creature, not a threat. More like a storm made of thought and gravity. A force so powerful that even the shadow recoiled from it. The researcher gasped. This darkness. It wasn't the danger. It was the warning. The shadow had been protecting species, not scaring them. The reason the map ended at this point wasn't because the shadow wanted to hide. It stopped explorers because something beyond the shadow should never be awakened. The historian closed her eyes, feeling the truth settle inside her. It was trying to shield us, to keep us from crossing into something we are not ready for. The pilot stared at the moving darkness. Then why show us this now? Why reveal it after all these years? The shadow shifted again. The images faded. Now, only one remained, a faint glow deep inside the darkness, like a spark struggling to stay alive. It pulsed softly, each time dimming more than before. The researcher realized what it meant. It's weak. The historian nodded slowly. For ages, it's been holding back that ancient force, protecting the galaxy. But now, something changed. It can't hold forever. The pilot felt a chill. So it's asking us for help. The darkness pulsed once, as if in confirmation. The ship trembled not from fear, but from a kind of understanding. The boundary of the map wasn't a warning to stay away. It was a signal that the Guardian was failing. The researcher whispered, "Other species remembered the shadow and feared it, but they forgot what it was protecting them from." The historian took a deep breath. Now it's showing us because humans, we always ask questions. We always look deeper. Maybe it believes we're the ones who can understand it. The pilot swallowed hard. So what do we do now? The darkness moved closer, not threatening, not attacking, just touching the front of the ship like a hand pressing gently against glass. And in that moment, the crew didn't feel fear. They felt trust. A quiet message filled their minds, not words. Not sound, but meaning. Do not let the galaxy forget again. The historian opened her eyes. It wants us to be the bridge, to tell the truth, to prepare everyone. The pilot nodded. Then we go back, not to run, but to warn them. The researcher stood up with newfound determination, and to tell them the map doesn't end here because of fear, but because something beyond it sleeps. And if it ever wakes up, the shadow won't be able to protect us alone. The pilot powered the ship again. The engines hummed softly. The darkness slowly stepped back, letting them through. Almost like a guardian watching over travelers, leaving its home dot as the ship turned away. The shadow pulsed one last time, gentle, calm. Almost grateful. Dot, the historian whispered, "We'll come back. Not to explore, but to stand with you." The ship moved away from the boundary, leaving the deepest part of human space behind. The stars grew brighter again. The air inside the cabin felt lighter. It was as if the darkness lifted a weight from their shoulders, but they knew their journey wasn't over. They had a truth no one had told for centuries, a truth every species needed to hear. Dot, and for the first time in a long time, the galaxy would learn that the map did not end at human space. It ended at the shadow that had protected them for 1,000,000 years. Now, it was their turn to protect it back.